troops who have died in service to our country and all those serving our country in the armed forces. Thank you, and now we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Richard Anderson.
Here.
Cheryl Andrews.
Here.
Ronald Bergstrom. Leo Kukunis. Christopher Kanega.
Here.
James Killian.
Here.
Marcia King.
Here.
Thomas Lynch.
Here.
Teresa Martin.
Here.
Deborah McCutcheon. Spiro Mitrakostas.
Here.
John Oman.
Here.
Paul Pilcher.
Here.
Anthony Scalise. Julia Taylor. Mr. Speaker, we have a quorum present with 95.45% of the delegates present, 4.55% absent.
Thank you. We now need a motion to approve the calendar of business.
Motion to approve the calendar of business.
Okay, moved and second. Any additions or corrections to the calendar? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now need a motion to approve the Journal of February 1st, 2012. You should have all received the journal in your packet.
Okay.
Is there any additions or corrections to the journal? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Move approval of the Journal, February 1st.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we have communications from the Board of Regional Commissioners. I see two of the commissioners here. Welcome.
Thank you.
What do you have to tell us?
Well, not too much, because you're going to hear a lot more from Mark than you will from me. But in preparation for his comments on the budget, I'm sure you all know, and some of you know directly because you came to some of our meetings as we met with the department heads and heard their presentations and had a dialogue with them about their budgets. And I'm really grateful for the assembly members who came. It was very helpful to us to hear their comments, and I hope that it was equally as valuable to them to hear directly from, not only from the department heads, but to also hear the back and forth and the dialogue with the department heads about their needs. And of course, as you will note, that there are no new positions and there is no new money. In fact, there is less money. But I wanted to tell you that in the past 3 years, the commissioners have made the rounds of meeting with the boards of selectmen on the Cape twice in the last 3 years. The first time around, it seemed, I don't know whether we were new and they didn't know us very well, but although Bill wasn't new, there was a discussion, but it didn't seem to be as valuable a discussion as the ones we've had recently. And we just finished meeting with 13 towns. We have 2 more to go, and they're busy now with town meetings, so we have to wait a while. But we send ahead the report on county services that were available and used, actually, by those towns during the course of this past year. And it was really a welcome response for us to know how valuable the Board of Selectmen felt that those services were. They had read the reports, which was wonderful. They actually responded to them. They were surprised, not only at the number of projects that the county was able to provide, but also the cost of those projects, the value, I should say the value really of the projects to their community. And there was a great response from them and an appreciation and a realization that the county does provide services to the communities that have value, and they want to look forward to working with us in the future about expanding that, which is what we're all talking about now, which is the regionalization efforts that we will be able to do, particularly with Open Cape. So I don't want to speak for Sheila, but I know I was really kind of blown away to see the really great response from the selectmen, their gratitude, and their appreciation for what the county has offered. In fact, one of the town managers, who actually spoke at the special commission meeting, one that was here, listed all of the activities that the town of Sandwich had received in the past year. And he made the statement, that was Bud Dunham, and he made the statement that he could have never funded any of that because they didn't have town funds to do it, and they would have never happened if the county didn't have those services available. So I ask you to think about that as you look at this budget, which is a decrease from this current year. It's a level-funded budget. It maintains what we've been doing, but it doesn't allow us to do much of anything else. So I hope if you have questions that you'll ask. I know you will.
No, I'm just going to, sort of underline what Pat has said, and I do think that, in looking at our first budget together when we were elected, and now we're going into our third year, I think that it does reflect the change in the times of what we're looking at and what we're facing and how we're trying to position the county to be able to address these big issues. A lot of what we're proposing is funding moving forward. It's not necessarily the end product, but it's getting us there. And again, as Pat said, this is really from feedback from not only boards of selectmen, but even more so town managers, who are the ones that handle those budgets. And they really, in those discussions, have identified what they really feel these are the things that they need the county to do, not just want the county to do, but because it's just going to be beyond their capacity. So when we're talking about regional umbrella services, when we're talking about regional efforts, and we're talking about funding for initiatives, we have to remember that these are really like life support systems that go out to the towns. So with that, we will present our budget, and I will give it back to Pat to introduce our. You want to introduce Mark?
See how that works.
Wait till after it's done, and then we can take, you have something, John?
When you talk to the town managers and board of selectmen, did they come up with any specific things that they would be grateful if we took over on a regional basis?
No, I would say not at this time. But they do know that we are all working very hard on regionalization efforts, and they welcome the opportunity to do that. Now, the Lower Cape has the, what do they call themselves? The intermunicipal.
I'm sorry, the Committee of Municipal Cooperation, and they met this week. I was unable to attend, but Dan Gallagher spoke to them about these regional services. And these are things where they do feel like there is if you're asking if the administrators asked for us to take anything over, it's really future that we're talking about. Like, these are the types of services we would like you to be able to provide because they will be a benefit to us. So when you're looking forward to, a regional wastewater plan, regional umbrella services, collating systems, all of this, it's beyond their capacity. They're involved. They're part of the decision-making and the structure that's being built. I mean, it's not like anybody's being left out of the loop here. And it's all steps going forward, but it is steps forward into the 21st and 22nd century.
To follow on that, at our next meeting next week, we are going to talk about the RUS, the Regional Umbrella Services. And because the county needs to take leadership on that, and we need to move that. And we can't wait till Open Cape is all done. We have to start working on it now. And that's they had the Smarter Cape Cod, when they had their last meeting, put a whole list of opportunities out for those who might be interested in working on specific projects. And one project was governance, and particularly governance of the RUS. And so we had that I signed up for that. And we had the first meeting today, and we've had probably about 15 people there. It was really good. It was a very good discussion on the RUS, what its capabilities are, what it can do for the communities, and how it really brings the Open Cape network together and allows it to work for the municipality. So it's pretty interesting. So if you have time next meeting, you might want to come for that discussion.
Marcia?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I received a copy of the Special Commission on County Governance wastewater recommendation, and it's basically asking you to create legislation to start a new authority, a wastewater authority. They may call it district, but let's call it what it is. Have you done anything about this? Are you planning on doing anything about this?
Well, I was at the meeting last week when that was brought up for the first time, at least the first time I had heard it brought up at the meeting. And I haven't seen that yet. But I think that's going to take a lot of discussion and a lot of input from the various towns before we begin to even consider an authority. I don't think it's something you just accept. I think it's something you have to do a lot of homework on. That's my opinion.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Another question, so you brought up the Russ. Is Open Cape going to pay for any of this? I mean, there appears to be some cost that the county is going to incur in all of this. No one seems to be saying like exactly what it is. But is Open Cape, because, I mean, they're not going to charge for us, or the municipals and the schools for the service, yet they're asking, I think, the county to help them institute some of the services. Is there going to be some sort of arrangement with them, I assume?
Well, Open Cape, as you know, just lays the fiber. I mean, just puts out the fiber. And then all of the next pieces of it are going to have to be taken care of or be paid for by the participating communities. 14 of the 15 towns signed on to the e-permitting. And e-permitting is like the first step with the RUS. I mean, it's one of the first projects the RUS can do, is the e-permitting. The cost of it will be borne by the communities who want to participate, because in the long run, let me go back a bit. The EDC has put out an RFP, and I think they had all the responders in this past week. I think 10 businesses responded to the RFP to do a technical survey review of each of the towns to see what they have in terms of their infrastructure for computer services, telephone services, all of that, what they have now, and what they could need or what they could replace if they were to do it on the terms of a RUS. It would be far more cost-effective for communities to participate in the RUS for some of these services than it would be for what they're paying for now individually. So when that report will be back, probably in 5 months, is what it will take to get all that information, and that will give everybody a much better understanding of what the next steps are following Open Cape. But Open Cape is just a construction project, and the rest of it is up to us, the county and the towns.
If I may, I think it's a little premature to number one, to respond to special commission. These things are being circulated to the committee members for their input. These are all draft situations, and it's not the complete report or set of recommendations being given to us. So I am not really, and I think all of us are not ready to respond to any of these things individually until it's a collective finished work. The other thing about the RUS is this isn't like if there's anything, there's potential revenue streams for the county out of this, but even that has to be hammered out, and those are the details that we will be working out of how the structure of this will happen within the county, because it's a municipal service. It doesn't have to be built. It's time for it to start being put together, so now is the time for us to be looking at this. But I think it has a very good potential in the positive for the county.
Who? Leo?
This is the first time I've seen this document, and it's conflicting with what you just said, so I just want to clarify it for my own thing. It says, "We strongly and unanimously recommend that the Barnstable County Commissioners," and it goes on
Yeah.
to say what it says. Has this actually been voted?
No.
No.
Okay.
No,
I just want to clarify, because when, if this is floating around, someone gets this, it appears
It's
if
a
it has been
proposal,
voted.
somebody wrote that as
Thank you.
a motion to be put before the committee.
It probably will be discussed further and voted on on Thursday night. That's a far cry from the commissioners adopting it. This is simply a recommendation to the commissioners, so
If it's passed.
if it's passed. Right.
Okay. Why don't we get a budget presentation here, and then we'll ask more questions.
Very good. Actually, for both John and Delegate King, I'll talk a little bit more about the regional umbrella services thing that you're sort of hearing about. You may not know exactly what it is, but there's also things in there as well that, John, these things tend to happen more piecemeal than in a global setting. That is to say, we don't sort of take over things that way. That's usually not how it works. It's usually there are towns that express an interest in getting a service from us, usually not all 15 at once. Usually it's some of the smaller towns typically. And in there you'll see that George is making some strides, hopefully, at expanding the health inspection and the sanitarian inspection services. We've been doing Orleans for a long time, and there's some opportunities to do some other towns in there. So you see those types of things. That's typically how it works. So, well, thank you very much. It's that time of year again. It seems like I was just here. It would be a year ago now, but it seems a lot shorter than that. So before you, you have a copy of the little presentation that I'm going to give, and that's very brief. We finished it at the Commissioners today in about 15 minutes. So, but you also have a copy of the proposed 2013 operating capital budget. You have the full document, which is the paperweight there that you have. It's 250 or so pages. And you have an executive summary in front of you. I have to thank Jack Mead for the cover picture on the executive summary. I think I stole that off his website, so I have to give him credit. But I think it's a beautiful picture. So, so what we're going to talk about a little bit in the budget is what the Commissioner's philosophy and direction for the 2013 budget was. I'm going to go over just a quick overview of the revenues and expenditures, and then a little budget highlights, sort of department by department. It won't be every department, but some of the things that are in there. Then I will touch upon a couple of things that we wanted to do that we weren't able to do, just to give you some background on that. So you've heard a lot about this regional umbrella services center thing. I will talk about that. And that's been sort of I don't want to call it the focus of the budget, but if there's anything new in the budget, that's what it is. And really, it's time, and we need to sort of do that if this opportunity's presented itself, and if we don't do it now, we're not going to be able to do it at all. It will be lost because Open Cape will be coming online in fiscal year 2013. So we have to kind of grab it when the iron is hot. Pat mentioned that one of the things we really tried to do in this budget, which is less money, as she said, is maintain the regional services that we offer. That is one of the things that I think when we talked to the town administrators, they heard from the selectmen that the things that we are doing are the right things. We're doing things that the towns need, things that the towns want, things that the towns appreciate, and things that the local citizenry in those towns appreciate. So we've tried to maintain our service levels and not cut back on services. And then there's a couple other regional things that I'll talk about. So the Regional Umbrella Services Center, this really comes about because of the opportunities that are presented by Open Cape and that backbone that's out there. And really it was asked for by the town administrators. This came up in sort of a discussion, I think, at the December town administrators lunch, and they meet every month. And they said, well, there's these opportunities that are going to be out there. They're not even really sure what those opportunities are, but we know we want to take advantage of them, whatever form they take. So in the budget, we've provided $75,000 in support of a new regional initiative called the Regional Umbrella Services Center. And its goals are really to enhance regional collaboration in the technology field, and to identify and implement, regional applications across municipalities, schools, public libraries, public safety departments. Pat mentioned the e-billing. That's kind of the first one. That started through a Cape Cod Commission technical service grant that they got to study that. Most of the town administrators that I've talked to, they're very enthusiastic about that. That can really make a difference. So that's sort of the first one. We may not even be sure what some of the other ones out there are. I know the public safety communication piece is a big one, and that's going to be one that we're going to look at as well. And it also supports a regional area network. So what we're trying to do is to provide resources in the form of consultants or a person. It's really the money's in there as professional services money. We didn't put it in as a new position yet, to give us the resources to sort of figure out what the opportunities are for that are presented by the Open Cape project. I think the towns they fully recognize that once you have identified the application, such as e-billing or whatever it has, they're going to be in either paying for it through their own budget or paying for it through the county through a fee for service. I think they recognize that, and I think they are comfortable with that scenario, because doing it regionally, I think they're starting to recognize more and more that you can do it with more efficiencies. I just highlight some of the regional services that you all know about and are familiar with, and certainly this is not an exhaustive list. Shellfish and marine programs are really economic development programs here on Cape Cod, and you remember we used to get $90,000 from the state to purchase shellfish seed and put it in our public shellfishing areas. Well, we don't get that anymore. So over the past few years, the county's been putting up $30,000 to procure the shellfish seed, and we distribute it to the towns. The regional household hazardous waste collection, that's a very important and very popular program, and we do those on a regional basis. We work with the towns to collect hazardous waste from homeowners. The health department equipment, I mentioned that a little bit. We will be buying 2 pieces of lab equipment in this budget that will give the lab the ability to do additional testing that they don't have the capabilities for now. But I did mention at the hearing earlier that there is no additional funding for the lab relocation project in the FY 2013 budget. We should be done by the end of this fiscal year, hopefully, with the renovation. Continue human service collaboration and coordination, and I don't know if you're aware, but Beth Albert and the Human Services Department did get a grant, a $60,000 Mass in Motion grant, it's called. It's to prevent obesity, and they're starting their efforts on Friday. There's a meeting at 10 o'clock, a kickoff meeting up in the new conference room in the old jail facility, so you're welcome to attend that. Regional planning services, you'll see the Cape Cod Commission's budget is actually down from last year as well, just like the county budget. They're a little bit hard-pressed. The transportation dollars that they usually get, grant dollars from the state, are not there as much, so they're really doing more with less. But there is an emphasis on the regional planning services for the towns still. And again, the Water Protection Collaborative, we're doing more in the area of the town grant program that we have for that. That's actually going up 50,000. It was 150,000 this year. It'll be 200,000 next year. So other regional efforts that we have is the Municipal Solid Waste Program that the Commission has been working on, wastewater and other water quality issues, both at the Water Protection Collaborative, at the Cape Cod Commission, and also in the Health Department. Also in the Health Department, we have the Public Health Nursing Division, the Medical Reserve Corps, and the Septic Betterment Programs. We're continuing those as well. The Open Cape, as you know, we're continuing to help with that. We've provided the building. They're actually working on the building to renovate the building with their grant money right now, so that will be good for the county. We'll get a renovated building out of that once that's completed. We'll have some space in there for the whole regional Umbrella Services Center. That will be located in there. And then finally, I mentioned just a little bit ago, Georgia's efforts to try to improve and expand the regional health and sanitary inspection services to some of the other towns on Cape Cod. So overall, this is what the budget looks like for 2013. It's $23,580,850, and it's a decrease of 5.6% from this current fiscal year. On the revenue side, both the county tax and the Cape Cod Environmental Protection Fund tax, the Cape Cod Commission tax, those are increasing 2.5%. The deeds excise tax rate, the rate remains the same at $2.70 per thousand. But the assumption on the deeds excise in terms of collections is decreasing. It's going down 6% to $7 million. And we've looked long and hard at those, and it's just, the revenues aren't there right now. And so we brought that number down. I thought that was important to do so this year, and we managed to accomplish that. Same on the business revenue. That's down 7% from this fiscal year. And the good news is, though, it still exceeds the total cost of operating the Registry of Deeds. So that's still, the Registry of Deeds basically pays for itself and brings a little bit more into the county coffers. The capital program is $1 million, just about $1.4 million, just under $1.4 million. There's an emphasis on still improving some of our IT infrastructure and those types of things. There's some funding for the facilities department. They have to do some roof work up on the old jail and some windows in the Superior Court and the old jail. And they're doing some fire alarms. They're continuing the fire alarm program, replacing fire alarms in the building. So we're working on that. And again, we're able to say that we're not using any Treasury balance funding for 2013. A few years back, we were able to get off of the assumption that there'd be money left over going into the new fiscal year, and we haven't done that for a few years, and we're not going to do it next year either, so that's good news. So that's just a snapshot of the revenues and where they're coming from. You see tax revenues make up 55% of the total budget. The tax revenues are the Cape Cod Commission tax to the towns, the county tax to the towns, and the deeds excise tax from the registry. The other big part is department revenues. Are 25% of the budget. That's the dredge and the septic betterment funds and the health lab revenues that we get. A bunch of other things are in there. So there's a bunch of revenues in there. Grants, we still are pretty decent with grants. They've gone down a little bit over time, but we're still 8% of the budget, or $1.8 million. And I talked about the bond issue revenues. The intergovernmental funding, most of that is the rent payment from the state for the for their occupancy in our courthouses. And there's the expenditures by group, and these are all in the budget as well. So you have copies of those in the budget as well. You see we're really, obviously we're a service-oriented agency. Our biggest pieces are our people. The salaries are 45%, fringe benefits 18%. So that's the biggest piece of our budget is staffing. Just in terms of budget highlights, what's in there, Arts Foundation, $30,000. We continue to fund the Arts Foundation. This year we are proposing that $10,000 of that come from license plate funds. I mentioned information technology and enhancing their capital program, especially in terms of improving our wide area network here at the county. We've also provided them with some additional professional and technical services funding. We're sort of trying to avoid doing things with employees now, so we have a little bit more emphasis on doing things with contractual services or professional services. Facilities department, I mentioned some of the things that we're doing in there through the capital program, roofs, windows, fire alarms, and we are continuing operation in the rest area with the license plate funding. That's about $35,000, something like that. Cooperative extension, I mentioned the regional household hazardous waste program. Mike McGuire does a terrific job with that. He's covered all our bases on that. He's done a terrific job. We did manage to continue to provide some money for both the forest fire prevention program that Bill Clark does and the land management mini grants that he does, which are those are two popular programs. Typically, we provide at least $25,000 per year. This year, it's down to $20,000, but at least we can continue to do something on those. Jack Mead has done a terrific job on his staffing efficiencies over at the registry. He's sort of recognized that if their business is slow, then if someone retires, they don't immediately need to replace him. So we've been able to continue to be very efficient at the Registry of Deeds. And I mentioned the health department, the testing equipment at the health lab. oops. I mentioned the Mass in Motion grants, so I've covered that already. Children's Cove, we are continuing to fund at the current service level. We did include the DFS, the Department of Division of Family Services funding, $65,000. So hopefully we will get that in 2013. We also continue to fund the Meals on Wheels program for elder services at this year's level, $75,000. So that's in there. And we do include of course, the required payment for the remaining unfunded pension liability associated with the sheriff. That's about a little bit over $1 million for next year. And you contrast that sort of with what we would normally pay, or what we were paying for the sheriff, was the maintenance of effort. And if you recall, that was up to about 2.7 when he transferred, and that was increasing 2.5% every year. So, and we don't have to pay that anymore, so that's good. I mentioned the Enhanced Municipal Support Initiative through the Water Protection Collaborative. That increased from $150,000 this year to $200,000, even though overall the Water Protection Collaborative budget went down. Same with Cape Cod Commission. They are doing more with less. Their budget is actually down for 2013, but there's still an emphasis on the local planning services. And the shared cost, there is a 2% COLA in the budget. We are including that. I think that's an important piece to include. Most of our staff are at their max step. We have an 8-step salary schedule, and almost everybody's at their 8th step. So the COLA is what they'll get in terms of any increases. And I did manage to include appropriated reserves. You know, there's the 2 appropriated reserve lines in the shared costs budget. This year we managed to squeeze $25,000 in each of those. Next year it's only $10,000 in each, so a $20,000 total. I did want to mention a couple things about what we weren't able to do. As you know, this budget, you'll see in most of the health insurance lines, reflects a decrease because health insurance reform was passed by the state, and now public entities are required to essentially match what the GIC offers in terms of their health plans. So effective July 1st, we will be offering what's called the Gic Look-Alike Plans. It'll be the same plans that we have, the same menu, but they will have a deductible and they'll have higher copays. So that reflects all the savings in the health insurance line. We originally would have liked to take some of that money and set it aside and put it away for a rainy day, but just the opportunity wasn't there for this year. I think it's more important that we sort of bring the revenues more in line with what we're seeing. So we weren't able to do that. The other thing that's out there, as you probably all know, especially the Provincetown people, our mileage reimbursement rate is a little bit out of whack. I think the Fed rate is 55 for this year. We looked at doing that as well, and we really wanted to do that, at least most of it, or if not all of it. We're at 41. To get to 55 would have cost countywide about $50,000. So we just didn't feel we were in a position to do that. So we didn't do that either. So there were some, you'll probably hear from some of the department heads, a number of positions requested: IT, facilities, Cove, Human Services, and we just felt that we weren't in a position to fund any new positions at this point in time. So we didn't. So the next thing is the review schedule. I know Janice has sent it out. I haven't had a chance to digest it too much yet, but we look forward to working with you again. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Mark. I guess we'll start off with questions from the Assembly. Yes, Spiro.
I just wanted to confirm before any of the questions I may have, this is a budget-to-budget comparison. This is not a budget-to-actual comparison.
That's correct, budget to budget, yeah.
Could you explain the $1 million shift in Cape Light Compact?
Well, they're not seeking any county funding for 2013, so.
They received $1 million in 2012?
They received about 106 of general fund money. The balance of whatever budget was in there was for the energy, from the energy efficiency fund. And so similar to how we did the EDC last year or the year before, can't remember now, it was really, since they're not looking for any county funding per se, we decided to move them off budget.
So if you remove them, which you have from the 2012 budget, and we pretend they weren't there in the 2012 budget,
Yeah, it's about,
the reduction budget to budget is only 1.8%.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
So we're really, using the commissioner's words, we're level funding.
essentially, it's a
budget-
level funded budget. Yeah.
Going forward, not a lot of savings. Was there any Treasury balance funding anticipated for 2012?
No, and
planning
there
to
is
do
a
that?
projection, there is a fund balance projection in there. I think it's on page 26, so you'll see. And the
So
fund
not-
balance is projected to be zero, so no.
Not doing any in 13 is somewhat redundant to not doing any in 2012. In other words, we're not planning to do any this year.
This budget, the current budget for 2012, didn't assume any carryover money from 2011, and neither does the 2013 budget assume any carryover from 2012.
Do you know, if you don't mind, last question. What we will actually spend in 2012 as a guesstimate at this point?
Yeah, it's sort of in a kind of a, I don't mean to say the word funky, but when you get to the fund balance projection that's in there on page 26, it does do that for the general fund. There's a projection both on what we think will be the total revenues sort of rolled up, and there's a projection on what we think the total expenditures will be sort of rolled up. So that is, so that's the only way to get to guessing what is going to be like on June 30th, so.
Is there a number there?
There should be, well, we're guessing that on June 30th we'll be at zero. That means the revenues and the expenditures will be offset, and the bottom line will be zero. There won't be any leftovers, so to speak. It won't be a negative number either, but.
We're anticipating collecting all of that $24.5 million?
It's usually, the revenues are down and usually expenditures are down, both.
So if we're anticipating spending less than collecting less than 24.5, we're also anticipating spending less than 24.5.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
I'm not quite sure if I understand what you were just talking about. I'm looking on page 26, at the top of the page, and it has a total general fund balance, 63011. And it says revenues and expenditures. The revenues are $7,641,000.
Yeah, that's just the general fund, don't forget, because the budget includes a lot of things outside the general fund, grants, other things like that. The dredge, for example, is outside the general fund.
So are you saying that and expenditures are listed as 10 million and change? So when we add all the revenues together, they're going to total up to 10 million and change, or is there going to be a shortfall?
Yes, because we still cover the reserves. We don't change the reserve numbers. So once you get to the bottom line, after you look at your revenues and your expenditures, and you set aside all the reserves on that page going into next year, which we haven't changed, the only thing that will be different is the 600,000 will now have to be subtracted because we are using it.
I'm not very good at this stuff, so I just need sort of simple, sort of straightforward understanding. Are we going to take in as much money from grants and the dredge and the general and the taxation and so forth as we're going to spend?
Yes, essentially that's what we're saying, yes. So the bottom line will be zero.
Thank you. Just on your presentation, page 2, you talked about Open Cape. For some reason, there's some general public has the inception that we're actually giving cash to them. There's no cash in this budget given to Open Cape,
No.
Is that correct?
There is built in, and this will be the same for all the towns going forward in 2013, and I think Sheila mentioned it, that they're building the highway, so to speak, but it's a toll road. And so to get on the highway, they're going to charge you because that's how their business plan works. So you're going to have to pay for the service. So there is some money in the IT budget to start paying for that express service, so to speak. And this will be the same thing with
But
all
that's
of the towns.
express service that we will be using.
But we're not just giving money to the Open Cape as a contribution to their program. No, we're not doing that. It's a fee for service, basically.
Okay. And as far as the building that we're providing and some in-kind services, if you will, is there going to be a calculation of how much funds that would have added up to, let's say, if we weren't giving it to them for free, just so we can have an idea?
Yeah, that was part of the whole, when they did their grant application, Leo, we had to calculate all that for them.
We have that somewhere.
Yeah, I don't remember the number.
Okay. On page...
20 years, like 800,000, I can't remember what it was.
Maybe that's what people are hearing out there in the street, and they think we gave them that kind of money, and I just want to clarify that. On page 4, in regards to the Arts Foundation, in your notes, it says $30,000, $10,000 from the license plate fund. Just so I can understand this, that means it's a total of $30,000 then?
It's a total of 30,
Okay.
20 from the county, 10 from the license plate.
And the Children's Cove $65,000 grant, I think it's on page 5, a $65,000 contribution.
Yep.
Are we getting involved again with giving them money and them anticipating getting a grant, and then if they get the grant, they will give it back to us?
God, no, I would never do that again.
All right.
So that's why we're assuming, see, what got us in trouble before was we assumed we didn't get it, then we did get it, and all of a sudden it freed up like 65,000 that we had to fight over. And so the better assumption is assume you're going to get it, and then if they don't get it, then
so
we're either going to have to come back or cut the budget.
Right, we're giving them $65,000 now.
We're assuming that of their total budget in there, I can't remember what the number is off the top of my head. I apologize, I should know every single number in there. 65 of that is coming from the state as a revenue, so that we don't have to give 65 out of the general fund.
All right, that's what I wanted to understand, thank you. I think I had one more, but, nope, I'm all set for now, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the second time for me, so fortunately it makes a little more sense than it did the first time. So thank you very much for the explanation. I think when I heard you speaking to the delegate from Yarmouth, you said because we took in less revenue in 2012, we also spent less.
Yeah.
And so compared to the budget. So my question is there one place in here somewhere where if I was curious what things we didn't spend money on this year, could I read about it?
No, you know where you turn to is the treasurer's report that was done for the end of fiscal 11. We'll do the same thing for fiscal 12 when we get to that point, when everything is done and finalized. And maybe what I should do is, I think back in September, there was these questions coming up, and I gave a presentation to, it was only the FinCom, about the treasurer's report. And I basically said, okay, you started the fiscal year with X dollars in the general fund balance, as Paul was mentioning, and you finished the year with X dollars in the general fund balance. How did you get from the beginning to the end? And we just went through it item by item, and there was a bunch of pluses and a bunch of minuses, and that's what you really have to look for. So what I'll do is maybe I'll send that presentation to Janice, and she can distribute it to the full assembly, and you'll get a sense then of how all these pieces sort of flow together. And that might be helpful.
Just for my clarity, the $35,000 for the state-owned rest fund to maintain it, where does that come from again? Is that from license plate money?
It comes out of the license plate fund, and it really staffs. We have a person during the summer at the facilities on staff who opens it in the morning, goes there during the day and cleans it, and then closes it at night. And then it pays for supplies, toilet paper and cleaning supplies, all that stuff. We've actually spent a lot of time, Pat and I and the commissioners, trying to come up with alternatives to fund the rest area. And there's not a lot of benefactors out there that sort of want their name on the bottom of a John or something, I guess. It's something. It's hard, as you know, there's not many alternatives to doing that. We'd like to do something else, we just can't figure out a way to do it.
The presentation suggested that 43% of the budget was in salaries.
45.
45 and 18 in benefits.
Fringes, yeah.
That is factoring in the reduction in healthcare costs?
That is correct, yes.
It seems like that's a pretty high percentage. I mean, you're talking about a 40% over and above salaries and benefits. Is that benefits just to current employees?
No, it includes retirees as
It
well.
includes retirees?
Yep.
Okay, well, that makes a little more sense.
The health insurance for retirees, yep.
And do you know what the savings is in the healthcare costs this year?
I should have mentioned this. I'm glad you asked that. Remember, part of the reform legislation allows you to include 25% of your savings as a mitigation fund, they call it. So you can provide mitigation to the impacts on the higher deductibles, higher copays, blah, 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 all that stuff. So we did include the 25%. And I believe the total savings run, not including the 25%, was 255,000. I think that's what it was, something like
Okay,
that.
so
That's the total.
Total.
And so you take 25%, and that's we did put that, it's in a line item right in the shared cost budget, so you'll see it. That's in there.
So basically, those costs, I mean, when everybody uses the word reform, I assume that means they're going to pay people less. By reform, you mean you're shifting the cost onto the employees.
Correct. That's what
Okay,
that means.
That's what
yes.
it means, okay.
That's what the
And you-
GIC does, by the
and
way.
for every dollar that they get taken away from them, you're going to give them 25 cents back.
It's a little bit, I hate to say, but I'll get on my soapbox because Maggie will appreciate that I did this. So, a couple of years ago, they came out with the rate saver plans, and we actually did pretty good getting people to sign up for rate saver plans. I think we had a total of 30 or 40 people sign up. Unfortunately, this time around, people who are actually paying on the rate saver plan next year are actually going to pay a little bit more. So people on the regular plans are going to pay a little bit less in terms of their premium. They're going to pay more. Everybody's going to pay more in terms of deductibles and copays and all of those things. But people who are on the rate saver are going to pay a little bit more. So.
Well, not everybody, because it really depends on whether you get sick or not. If you don't get sick, you're not going to pay anymore, right?
That's true. I guess you have a risk of paying more. That's what this is all about.
Well, I'm sure everybody has a bunch of other questions, but we're going to have to go over this document. Marcia, did you have something?
Just a quick follow-up on that. So the 25% savings, that's how you're going to, have you determined how you're going to return it to the employees? Is it going to be if you incur it, you get it back, so if you don't incur it, you don't receive any?
No, it's going to probably, I should say probably, we haven't decided finally yet, but the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group general discussion has been to recommend that you do a premium holiday or 2 premium, however much that savings allows. That way you spread it to everybody. It sort of everybody benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because otherwise if you don't get sick, it's sort of punishing the,
I
Well-
would suggest, just to make a quick suggestion, is you do it as a percentage of the deductible, because that way, if somebody has to spend a lot of money out of pocket, they get more. If you don't spend any money, then you don't get anything.
well, the nice thing about doing it as a premium holiday is the proportionality between family, individual, one parent, that all takes care of itself.
Okay. Anyway, is there anything else on the budget? We're going to get copies of it.
Quick
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
2% COLA, what's the dollar number?
I forget. It's in there. That's in the shared costs thing as well. I don't remember, Spiro. I'm sorry.
Do you go by the federal government or state government estimates of cost of living increases, or do you just come up with whatever? Yeah. Right up. Okay.
We've been doing. That's maybe a touch unfair. I think since I've been here, and Cheryl mentioned this is her second one. I think this is it's either 17th or 18th, if you can believe that. So I think since I've been here, there's been 1 or 2 times we didn't give a COLA. There's been one time that I remember where we gave 2% for half a year, and I think there was one time that I seem to remember doing 1%. But other than that, we've done about a 2% COLA.
Yeah, because I know there are some communities go by the cost of living increases. As a matter of fact, they gave a negative COLA. In other words, they would give a zero COLA a couple of years ago, not because they didn't have the money, but simply because it wasn't reflected by
That's
the
what it said,
national
yeah.
cost of living. But
Of course, does that mean that they give a 4 when it's a 4 or a 3?
Actually, they come damn close, but it's in arrears. It goes a couple of years later, so everybody's confused. So, anyway, I guess, yeah, just a minute. I'll go to Deborah and then John.
Mr. Zelinski, going back to the COLA, did you consider not doing it this year, given how dreadful the economy's been and how many people in the private sector are not able to have increases at all, or are in fact laid off and not working, particularly throughout the Cape?
I would say we did not consider not doing it.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 2, the $68,000 lab equipment, I'm grateful when the lab gets new equipment because there usually is a revenue projection. He left.
Darn. Then I'm not going to be able to answer your question.
Will this add any revenue to the health department, some of these testing machines that they get?
So let me broaden the question, John, so I don't have to say specifically those two pieces. I just got an email from Gung Min saying for this year, we figure he's going to be on $500,000. That's what's in the 2012 budget. That's actually what's in next year's budget, but George thinks that some of these receptors that I keep forgetting. Yeah, the personal care, all of that stuff that people really don't have any opportunity to sort of test now, and except through privately through an expensive lab, we're going to be able to do. So George does see an increase of revenue happening at the health lab. I didn't build that in, but because I'm not sure about the timing, it may not be until calendar year, 2013. So that would only be half of the fiscal year. So yes, we anticipate over time that all of these things are going to improve lab revenues.
And there's an undetectable, you can't detect it by money, but I know that George has worked tirelessly to build databases on water quality and cancer structure, things that really matter to people long term that George has brilliantly put into it that this equipment can do. And I just want to let the public in general know that it's not just about the money. There's some databases that he's been able to create and enhance through this that have been very beneficial to everybody in the county.
John, I won't say it, but as we joke in the office, George knows his you-know-what.
I have one more question, if it's all right. May I ask one more question?
Yeah, let's close with that.
Yeah. On municipal solid waste,
yes.
I know that's in the Cape Cod Commission's budget, speaking of closing with that. In 2015, every town, with the exception of Brewster, I believe, is going to be up for a renewal of the CMAS stuff. What are we doing, or what is the Cape Cod Commission doing to regionalize those contract talks?
I'm going to have to punt to Patty Daly on that. She's done a lot of work on pulling all those pieces together. That is why I mentioned it, because it's sort of coming to a head. But they've been doing a lot of work on talking to CMAS, talking to Bourne, talking to what the alternatives are out there, John. But I would respectfully say that that's a question for Patty Daly.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and I'm sure you're going to be
very good. Thank you.
Grilled a lot more by the Finance Committee and various others coming down the pike. Do we have any communications from public officials? Do we have any communications from members of the public? Okay, hearing none, the Assembly will now convene, and we'll begin with the reports of committees, and beginning with the Special Committee on County Governance, and I'm going to turn to Julie on this one.
Okay. I got in my package this grid that presumably you did for me, Janice.
Yes, Pat Eldridge sent that to everyone, so I printed it out.
Does everyone have one? No. Okay, maybe we could get that for everybody, because that's, you probably only need one page of it, but that is what the Special County Commission vote sheet, that means there's 13 topics that are going to be voted on, supposedly, on Thursday night, tomorrow night. And there was, most of the time was spent at the last meeting talking about wastewater and some Cape Light Compact, some Ross. Some of these are more controversial than others, and it might, if you're interested in what the vote is, unfortunately, I'm not going to be there tomorrow night, but this is what's going to happen, supposedly, the vote. Interestingly enough, the environment wastewater question was presented, and I was quite surprised to find an extremely favorable response from everyone at the meeting, particularly from the 3 town managers. And there was not a single negative remark from anyone about the concept of an authority. So I would expect that that will pass and will be very strongly supported by this special commission. I heard no negative comment. There's some details about it. I don't know what that piece of paper says. It has been hashed over quite a bit, but the concept was very strongly received. Next issue, supposedly at tomorrow's meeting, we were going to discuss structure, but it doesn't seem likely to me based on these 13 votes that will have to be taken. Again, if I were to predict, as I think I've mentioned before, there will be a strong sentiment for a regionally elected legislative body. Well, that's an issue. A strong support for a regionally elected group of people, maybe 7 people from 7 districts, and a strong executive with, now, since we haven't had the discussion, I'm sort of speculating, but I'm guessing that this will mean that some of the executive powers that now rest with the commissioners would go to the new executive, elected or appointed, and that the legislative powers that exist in the present charter would go to this new regionally elected group. Maybe the division would be similar to the town manager council setup that's in Barnstable. And I don't really know how that operates. As I said, this hasn't been discussed. But I'm guessing that unless Ron or I spoke strongly against that plan, there won't be anyone else speaking against it. And I'm not going to speak against it. What I am going to say, probably not tomorrow night, because it's probably not actually going to come up. That's just as well, since I won't be there. But I have sent out some comments, is that I think that this special county commission group, despite my initial, I don't like to say cynicism, but close, has taken a pretty serious, a very serious approach, and is really looking at some big suggestions and big changes. And I would think that they're going to be difficult changes, and some of them might require legislation in Boston. They certainly would require a tremendous amount of homework and leadership, political capital, and I would be a bit worried that if we as a county wanted to proceed with some of these important issues, it might be a distraction to be changing the system of government. So that would be my fear, and my reason for not being gung-ho on doing that change. But that's not the same as my opposition long-term or even short-term. I'm just wondering, is there enough political leadership? Is there enough political energy and time to do all of these things at once, especially if some of them required going to the ballot?
Okay. Let me just add a couple of things to what Julie said, is that as far as the wastewater authority goes, Paul Niswicki and Andrew Gottlieb were both there, and they gave a presentation, probably all heard it before, but they made 2 points. The one point that Paul and Andrew emphasized strongly was that the Cape Towns are going to be mandated at some point down the line to clean up their wastewater, all right? Just simply, Chatham was under a consent order, that's why we did it. But they think that sooner or later, the state is going to come down and put in some mandates. And secondly, they made the point that they didn't think that if it's left up right now to the individual towns, one by one, to do this, that it was ever going to happen. He said politically it was unfeasible. That was their impression, that it just wasn't going to happen.
And they meant their concept was it will happen because the federal government and the state government will
Right.
will mandate it, possibly the federal government, depending on this lawsuit, and that if it is done individually, the planning and implementation by towns, they were estimating an $8 billion bill. They feel that if it were done on a regional basis, you could bring the bill, especially for the planning, down to closer to $3 billion. Now, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of savings. I, of course, cannot in the least bit make any judgment as to the accuracy of those figures, but $1 billion here and there is not chump change. And they said the window of opportunity is maybe a year. Then it will be mandated, and it will be the high price.
All right.
They are very, very firm on that.
So they feel, and you got to understand what they're talking about now, because I made the suggestion, and I think the people followed, is that we're talking about a regional agency. We're not talking about a regionalization the way we do in other things where the county sort of liaisons with the towns and says, well, we can help you here and help. Talking about a regional agency is actually going to look at Cape Cod without the town boundaries, look at it from a geophysical standpoint as to where the wastewater is, where it's going, and so on. So it's really not going to be 15 towns and each one of them getting help from the county as to how they're cleaning up their wastewater.
Their concept of payment, funding, would be directed less at town payments and more at ratepayers as the basis of funding as opposed to towns. Now, they had a little sop, which I think was sincere, to the towns such as I think it's Falmouth. They were thinking Falmouth, Provincetown, and Chatham as being a bit ahead of the curve. They felt that a district was the term, but authority is what we're talking about. That there would be, if we're talking about total costs, then planning costs that have already been incurred by people, by towns, could be credited give them credit for their ratepayers.
Okay.
But that of the embayments, 3/4 of them cross town lines. There are very few that do not. And whether this is possible to get done, I don't know, but there was no one at this meeting, and there were a lot of people that didn't think it was the way to go.
Yeah, and the county governance thing, I wrote some suggestions. They weren't copied to everybody though. I put it to Assembly of Delegates, but we'll get them around. And Julie also wrote some recommendations. We're kind of groping in the dark because even though we can see where this is going, no one has actually put something on place and voted on it. So, but we're pretty sure that they're going to make some kind of a recommendation to consolidate the governmental functions of the county government. So, I'm not as enthusiastic about it as Julie is. So we'll see what we'll see what comes of it, but I'd like to get a sense of the assembly. It's hard to do it today because, of course, we don't have anything concrete in it, but at some point, we have to get a sense of the assembly where they're going to go with this. The indication is that somehow they're going to do an end run around our process. We had that debate at the very end of the meeting where they said we're going to go directly to the ballot. I don't know how they can do that, but I'll have to bone up on it and find out exactly what the options are. So given that, if you have any questions, remember now, this is a report from committee. It's not we're telling you what happened. Okay, yes, Marcia.
I more have a comment. I was at the Selectmen Councilors meeting last Friday, which was a legislative update, and Representative, I think it was Turner, who said that Speaker DeLeo has point blank told every single one of the reps there will be no tax increases in the budget coming in. And because they were talking about the issue of the renting out the houses and getting taxes, I don't mean to give you guys my back, the taxes for the houses, and so that they wanted a home rule petition. And Cleon said that the speaker has said, no, it's not going to happen. So I'm really curious how you think, if the special commission thinks that they're going to get this, because there has to be a tax. It's an authority, there has to be money functioning. And even if you go at $3 billion, say this, 2,500 houses, give or take, on the Cape? Is there more? The 100, oh, okay, then, because I think 25, you're talking probably, over 30 years.
25,000 houses.
Okay, so that's like 30,000 per house over X amount of years, you're talking $1,000 per year. And it's a tax, so, whether you agree or disagree, you may want to mention that tomorrow at the meeting, but that's what Cleon said Friday, that the speaker was absolutely adamant, not going to listen to anybody's home rule petition on that.
Well, it goes to show you what a pathetic institution the Massachusetts legislature is if one guy can stand there and say, this is what's going to happen and this is not one. Imagine if I said, well, I'm not going to forget what the assembly wants. This is what I'm telling you. This is what's going to happen. I can't believe if he had any diplomacy, he would have said, "It's my sense of the legislature that they're not going to pass
Well,
this."
Ron, actually, I will tell you at the breakfast, that's exactly what people said. That you can't believe that the speaker actually told, and he said, "Yeah." The speaker came out and just basically said, "Don't even bother."
Well, I guess the other 100 members are kind of extraneous, but you have any questions, John?
So let me get this right. So they're going to come up with, on governance, never mind the big issue with wastewater, on governance, they're going to come up with some plans to change county structure.
We haven't.
Well, let's suppose.
All right,
Let's
we have
suppose
not
that's
had
what's
the
going to happen.
discussion, but I'm guessing.
All right, let's just suppose that. So what is the path? The path is either they're going to go back to the commissioners with recommendations.
Yes, in theory, all of this is simply a report to the commissioners. And then it would be up to the commissioners to decide whether they wanted to proceed with that. If they decided they didn't want to proceed with that, say a change in structure, it's possible for citizens to put issues on the ballot.
Yeah, but here's the deal. Here's what I told them. I said, even though they make recommendations to the commissioners have no more authority to make changes in the county government than anybody else. If they wanted to do it, they would have to go through the same path that any citizen went through to go to either to us or to the ballot.
It would have to be either approved at the assembly and put on the ballot, or it would have to be an initiative, signature initiative to go on the ballot. Either way, it has to go on the ballot, and those are the two routes. And so as I say, my worry is that a change such as this will require a great deal of both political leadership and political activity. And the question is, are there enough people in the county who wish to be active on this topic? And we know that there's a little bit of a visibility issue in general. Are there enough people? Are there people on this special county commission who feel that they really are so into county government now they'd want to pursue this? That I don't know, and we can just speculate about that. I'm just guessing what I think the commission, the special county commission, is going to recommend.
Okay, Paul?
Well, I think John had another question.
No, and not to mention the legal fees that would be involved, the legal expertise that would take to unravel the county
Oh.
structure,
Yeah.
as it stands.
Yeah, I mean, right.
Where
There's
does that
no-
money come from?
That money would have to either be raised by people who wanted to spend it on a lawyer to draft a new charter, or the county, if the commissioners wanted to do it, they would have to put the money in the budget. And, I see it as very, very difficult and time-consuming, and that's why I'm not terribly excited about the idea, but I'm just...
Okay. Paul, did you going to get in here?
I feel compelled to speak because I'm hearing that there was no opposition or reservation about this wastewater authority, and I have to tell you that, at least in my town, the wastewater authority, which is going to entail taxing small towns for septic system, people in small towns for septic systems that may not be septic systems that they need, evokes the worst fears of exactly what is going on at the Cape Cod Commission. I hear it constantly in my town and in the towns in the Outer Cape. And so I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to convince folks in the Outer Cape that this would be a good idea.
Yeah, my feeling is, and I feel hesitant to go in there and suggest I can read his mind, but my feeling is that Paul Niswicki would rather not do this. In other words, he would rather that the bill came down from the state and just everybody would have to fend for themselves, but he's volunteering to do it. I really feel this way. He's volunteering to do it, saying, look, there's a time window right now where you can save money. If you don't want to do this, then later on, you just have to pay the piper, and that's what it is. So to say that, you see, this is important. People saying, and I've got emails saying, oh, the commission and the county is trying to take some more money from you. They're not trying to take some more money from you. They're saying is, here's an opportunity to limit your liability. If you want to take it, it's fine. If you don't take it, that's fine too.
I'm not necessarily voicing a personal opinion so much as reflecting the opinion of my town, and my town has already engaged now in 2 to 3 years of study, of wastewater studies that are hopefully resulting in some creative solutions to the wastewater problem in our town.
I think that Niedzwiecki and Gottlieb believe that if the county is if Cape Cod is forced by the state, or maybe this lawsuit, to do it under their mandate, that the cost would be so crippling to the economy that we would be in a disastrous situation. So I think the idea of the $3 billion tax is extremely unpleasant to contemplate and very scary to people. They seem to feel that the economic consequences of the imposed solution, which they see as coming in a year if nothing happens, as the end of the Cape as we know it economally.
Okay.
For small homeowners, they will be destroyed.
Deborah?
I don't know if that's true.
You want to get in?
I'm not really understanding something about this proposal. I mean, what I heard you say was that Niedzwiecki and the water guy were talking, Gottlieb, were talking about ratepayers basically bearing the cost here. But ratepayers...
Not ratepayers, meaning users of sewage, not necessarily. It was all households on Cape Cod. There might be differences between what people who are sewered would be paying and what, sorry. Yeah, there would be a difference probably between sewered people, which would not be everyone, but the costs would have to be spread, they think, among all households, even if sewered people paid additional costs.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Paul was saying, is that their concept was not the big pipe solution. Their concept was what they were gonna look at the watersheds, all of them, doing similar to what's done in Wellfleet, except they would do it Cape-wide, and say, what is the best and most efficient way of dealing with this particular watershed? I mean, in Chatham, when we did this, we divided it up into watersheds. If you flush your toilet, where does it go? And how many people are involved? So they felt that they could essentially regionalize those studies, because it's easy enough if you're in an area that only has a single watershed, but if you're living in Bass River, you really have to deal with a couple of different towns. If you're down in the South Shore there, you have to deal with several different towns. So that was their concept. When it came to the financing, we spent a lot of time on the concept, very little time on the financing. No one wanted to reach out, I did, and I was shot down right away, so I didn't say another word. So, yeah, who knows if it'll ever happen. Just.
Yeah, I wasn't part of this meeting, but I just have to add, you're saying a lot of things that are going to happen. A lot of this has already happened. I've got the map on the wall in my office from when I was on the Water Protection Collaborative of where it shows they need to focus. It's Route 6 South, and it's not even up the Lower Cape area. As far as where, yes, there will be some big pipe that needs to address what they're talking about. But you're right, the financing was never discussed, and that's the problem here, is that we're all asking how it would be done, and nobody knows. A number of times, the $8 billion and the $3 billion numbers have ended up in the press, but the regional wastewater plan, which the collaborative was charged with working with the commission on doing 4 years ago, it's not here yet. And I was told the very last time I was at a Water Protection Collaborative meeting where those numbers were presented, we were told pretty honestly that they were back of the envelope numbers.
Yeah, I don't think.
And I think people.
I don't think it's going to be that bad. I honestly don't. I think they're going to come up with easier solutions to areas that are less critical. But that's not part of the report. And this is what we found.
Well,
okay.
If I may.
Yes.
I have to point out that, this is not going to sell well out there on the Outer Cape. This plan from the Special Commission on County Government, first of all, to abolish their representation, and then to make us pay for your sewer. I mean,
Well, it was brought. I brought up in my the little letter I sent to the Special Commission, which you should have gotten, that the Cape Cod Commission, when the Cape Cod Commission was formed, the reason that we rule on their DCPCs and their regulations is because the town were afraid of this big regulatory authority, and they wanted to have some buy-in through their delegates. Now, that buy-in, under different scenarios, will be taken away from individual towns, our representative individual towns, to this regional agency. So there may be some pushback there, in a sense. But as Julia said, in concept, people support this. And I think John brought it up too, but when you get down to the details of making it actually happen, it could be enormously complicated in the time frame that we have to deal with it, which is between now and when the ballot is finalized, which is, I think, in June, May or June. So that was what we discussed. We'll discuss more tomorrow and some of these things. We also had a meeting this afternoon of the Special Committee on Inquiry into CLC and CVEC. We had a draft, which I don't know, I guess we could copy to everybody, of our recommendation.
I think we agreed that it wasn't the committee's draft yet.
It wasn't the committee's draft yet, so it was, but we're basically just going over the history of our committee, how it was formed, under what circumstances, and what its charge was. And we brought up some issues that we had brought up in the past that we feel were not adequately addressed. And I think what really came out of the meeting was, unfortunately, starting, now you've got the budget, from the next month or two, what we're going to be doing is doing budgetary hearings. So there's probably going to not be much room for anything else. So we're going to be, while we are going to communicate with CVEC and CLC to try to clear up some of these issues, I think the Assembly is going to go into a hiatus, at least officially, until after the budgetary process is.
You mean the committee?
I mean the committee.
Assembly.
The Assembly, well, we've been in hiatus for a while, yeah. So that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions. Some of you were there. I hear nothing. How about, John, you were there?
Well, I take a little different tack on. I think that we should wrap this up as soon as possible. and let them get back. Give our recommendations out to what we do, and, but I may be the only voice in the forest with that.
Well, rather than we don't want to re-energize that debate, but if there's nothing else, we have a report from the clerk.
The only thing I have to report is that the emails are up and running, and I have made changes to the website. So now when someone tries to contact you, they will be contacting you via your new county email address. So if you're not quite there yet, you may want to think about getting that process wrapped up. And that's it.
Okay. We were going to do a discussion regarding Assembly's position on, since it's in the agenda, I just like to ask, looking around the table, Tom is gone and he has a big vote, but I mean, how do you guys feel about that recommendation that Julia, presuming that's the one that's, because I'm gonna be on that, sitting in that chair tomorrow, and I'm gonna speak, I can speak for myself, I can't speak for you, but I'm just curious as to what kind of enthusiasm there is.
You weren't here last week, the last time we met, I mean, and the deputy speaker sat in for you, and there was some discussion amongst the members on whether, and it was actually brought up by me, on whether we, as the assembly as a whole, should be taking a position on county government and its structure. And it was kind of drawn to my attention that because it wasn't on the agenda, that it would be inappropriate for us to, make any motions or any suggestions on that matter. So that's why you see it here today. Tom pretty much spoke and thought that he thought we shouldn't do anything and wait until we actually get something in writing from the special committee and respond to that, as opposed to putting our 2 cents in. And quite frankly, I kind of agreed with him near the end after we talked about it a little bit. But now, seeing that there's actually going to be a vote taken, tomorrow night, it seems kind of crazy for us to, sit here and deliberate for another, at least an hour, because we're going to have to really discuss, our positions and our thoughts on where we should or shouldn't be going, and then somehow formulate that into a document that we can give out to the public, saying that this is how the full assembly agrees.
It would be quicker and easier to get their
so.
recommendation and take a vote. We could take a vote on whether we approve of it up or down. I think that would probably be an easier way, yeah. But prove up what, if and when a specific recommendation comes down from the Special Commission on County Governments as to reorganizing the way county government is done, then I think we should take a vote on that, because, and I wouldn't think this normally if this commission was totally independent, which I thought it was going to be in the beginning, it'd be one thing. But now that they're reporting to the commissioners, obviously the commissioner is going to have a chance whether they approve of this or not. So I don't see why the assembly shouldn't also take a position up or down on any recommendation.
Speaker, I personally would disagree. I don't think we charge them. I don't think we need to pass judgment on their deliberation. If the commissioners wouldn't want to do that, that's fine. I'd much rather see an affirmative statement agreed upon by this group to be put out there, whether it agrees or disagrees, overlaps, or whatever you want to call it, with theirs. And I also think that if there is a recommendation that the commissioners are entertaining and they're marching towards some sort of legitimization, by that I mean going to the ballot with it before they send it off to the legislature, then you should be prepared to crank up the Charter Review Committee of our own to force it into the appropriate procedure, as opposed to just having them just go ahead and start filing legislation.
That is the issue, and Julie brought that up at the meeting, is that if indeed there is a consent, in other words, they could come to us. They could say, look, if they could come to us. I think they're not coming to us because I don't think we're going to agree with it. But if there was a consensus of this body to agree to those things, then the easiest method would be to go through the regular charter provisions. We could get a charter review committee up and running. We could vote on the recommendations, and it would go from there to the ballot to the legislature. So then, Julie, is that right? Your understanding?
I think so, but I just think it's unlikely that you're going to get a charter commission, that we would get a charter commission that would have some of the people that have put in this time. I think we're unlikely. I mean, I've been on some of the charter commissions, and I think you'd have I think I don't think we'd be very successful in trying to promote a counter charter review. I suspect that would not be politically very viable.
Well, I'm not thinking a counter review. I'm thinking if there was a consensus among the majority of this, a majority-weighted vote among this body, there was an agreement with these recommendations. I mean, I don't agree with them, but if that was the case, then we could go through rather than have them run around and collect signatures, they could simply run it through the normal process that's listed in the charter. Why they don't do that in the first place, I don't know, but...
Yeah, I'm basically hearing a lot of, I don't like the county charter, the way it's written.
Right.
So either we live by the county charter or we do something else. So if you'd like to force something through the county charter, let's just put something through the county charter's procedures. It calls for a charter review, and let's put it forward. If the charter also provides for a second route to the ballot box, let them go get 10,000 signatures, anybody who wants to do that. But to try to do shortcutting here and there so we can have some sort of product at the end of the process, I'm not understanding why we need to have a product at the end of the process unless it serves the interests of the institution.
Well, I guess, and it's hard to explain, but what Julie's trying to tell you is that this whole thing has been carefully nurtured. There's 25 people around that table. They're the who's who of Cape Cod. The commissioners knew that when they appointed them. If they make recommendations, it's basically a challenge saying that we can come up with all the charter review committees that we want. It's not going to make any difference. They're going to go right to the ballot. We could short circuit that process, like you say, and just come up with our own charter review and our own recommendations?
Yeah.
We could do that.
And competing if it happened to make it to the ballot.
We could do that, and I thought about it early on. I mentioned it, but...
I mean, otherwise you're going to have half of us out there running against whatever's on the ballot.
Leo?
We got to really sit back here and understand what's really happening, all right? You have a committee that has been formed by the county commissioners and asked to come up with a suggestion. Now, if the vote is taken tomorrow, it's probably going to take at least 2 more weeks for them to compile this in some type of a readable document. That somehow has to, again, be given to the county commissioners. They're the ones that are going to decide whether they want to pursue those recommended changes or not. There's no way this is going to end up on November's ballot this year. I mean, it's just not going to happen. The only possible way it could come even close to that happening is once this subcommittee is disbanded, that a group of citizens on their own decide that they want to go by petition, collect enough signatures to have this charter change put on November's ballot. Now, unless there is some extremely well-educated attorneys on this little committee and group that are going to be able to draft this charter change with the in-depth language that it's going to be necessary to do to create this kind of change, because all that language has to be imperfect, ready to go before June 1st. Because it has to be, and all their signatures have to be collected prior to June 1st, so that all that can be submitted up to the state for the Attorney General's review. That's a pretty short time frame. I only asked you guys today, I'm not asking you should we respond to what we think they're going to say. I only wanted this on the agenda now is, should we be taking a collective vote on how we feel government is operating or not operating, and are there any changes that we want to see happen? Quite frankly, I think we waited too long. Why should we give them? So I'm prepared to say to my own idea, no, let's just let this run its course and see what happens. But to continue sitting here discussing on how we're going to react to something that may or might not or could happen or would have, it just seems ridiculous. I mean, again, they're a committee that has been asked by the commissioners to look at county government. They might take their report and file it, and they might try to do everything that's in it. And if they do, I'm hoping that they would first go the correct avenue, which is ask us to formulate a committee, but it's a 2-year process. It's going to be a 2-year process to make those kind of huge changes. And quite frankly, if some voters out there think they can do it before June, good luck to them.
So you asked to put this on, Leo?
I didn't ask. It came out of last
Oh, okay.
last week's.
Ron,
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if there's anything on the ballot in June, but I would not be surprised if a majority of the commissioners could see their way clear to supporting the kinds of things that I've mentioned.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me. And I would, in fact, actually be surprised if some of the other people on this special commission aren't ready to go. Remember Sheila's favorite statement in the past, aren't ready to go the signature route. That's not to say I think it's easy and that I think it would be on the ballot in for next November, but I think there are people on this commission
Who think that way.
And I think there are possibly 2 commissioners who are open and not opposed to these ideas.
It brings up the situation that many of you are familiar with, is that you can make all the recommendations you want to a town meeting about what you want to happen, but when an item comes on the ballot, you're not allowed to advocate, you're not allowed to spend any money on it. In other words, the commissioners don't have the authority in the charter to make charter changes. If they decide to advocate for a ballot initiative, that brings up a question is, I guess as individuals they can say whatever they want, but they can't, I would think that they could not use county funds to support a ballot initiative. So that, the logistics of this is just so complicated anyway, yeah.
Look, I think we know what they're going to vote tomorrow. They're going to vote to abolish us because this commission has had a solution and was looking for a problem, and they determined all along that we're the problem. It's been floated with the Wastewater Authority. It's been floated 7 members as commissioners. So, I'm going to throw it out just because we were being taped also, are they partisan or nonpartisan? Because they got to be partisan because no one's going to pay to run countywide. You're talking...
Not be countywide.
Well, no, what I've heard is they want 3, 1 in each district, and then 2 of them are going to be countywide, whatever. Are these full-time? Are we now talking $50,000 for 7 people? Are we talking benefits? They're not even talking about, that would run you about $500,000 for 7 people at $50,000, plus say another 25 for benefits. That's just what they're going to say tomorrow.
No, I think they're going to go with the Barnstable model of the counselors and the strong executive. That's what they're talking, district people.
But you still have to then run you still have to run in a bigger area. But I think what Deborah said earlier is that you're taking away the votes for the smaller towns, and if this group talks about democracy, this body is the only one in this county that actually has representation, 1 vote, 1 person. We are a House of Representatives. The problem is people can't get their brain around the issue of the weighted vote. We can make the vote being 1 person for every 50 people. Barnstable's still going to have more people sitting here. It doesn't matter. I don't understand why people, when you don't understand that. So they want to basically take away people's rights, especially the smaller towns. So Truro, you're going to get your wastewater, and you're going to lose your vote. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
Right. So I'm not going to go because I know how they're going to vote tomorrow. I kind of at one point want to take a stand, but then it's like let them go and let me see the 20-odd members out getting signatures if they want to come not through us.
So my understanding that we're going to wait and see what they say before we, okay, Cheryl?
Since we're all writing our political obituaries at the moment, I'll join in and simply say that this has certainly been talked about.
You're going to have a long one, too. It's starting.
Well, it depends on how well the reporting is done. But Provincetown is not about to leave Barnstable County. We've been part of the county since it was formed. No, I'm talking about politically and financially.
Yeah.
But if you start calling this regional government, and the focus is a sewer south of Route 6, The region is no longer Cape Cod, and it's no longer Barnstable County. It is a different region that from Eastham up doesn't belong to. And I think, you know, well, we've all seen how every now and then the commission, a town will go to town meeting and say, we want to leave the Cape Cod Commission. I think if this is handled the way it seems to be handled so far, those kind of conversations, we're going to be hearing them again pretty soon.
Okay. Anyway, well, I'm sure we'll hear more of this. The meeting is tomorrow. You guys are willing to attend if you want. I think it's at 6:30 at the 11 and 12, but, yeah, they don't list it, so it's strange, but, anyway, so now where are we?
Ready to go home.
We have one more item on the agenda.
What?
Item 15.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed.